the top 10 highlight reel athletes of all time. There's a ton of different athletes you can choose from, right? Some of the most electric players in the world, some of the most athletic guys would make my list here. But in a lot of cases, guys that make this list aren't necessarily the greatest athletes of all time on their sport. And on the flip side, you're not going to come across some maybe of the greatest athletes of all time in a sport making this list. For example, Tom Brady would not make anybody's top 10 highlight reel lists of all time. He just wouldn't. He just simply wouldn't do it. A lot of guys are really good in baseball. Mike Trout's amazing, but he probably wouldn't make this list either. He's an incredible athlete. He's got a ton of amazing highlights, but baseball is not necessarily a sport that you're going to find a lot of highlight tapes from, right? You'll get one clip here and there, one home run, one thing you could bank on, but it's hard to get a reel of highlights together unless it was a amazing defensive player. There is a baseball player that I put on this list, but the rest of them are football, basketball, and you'll see the other one here, which is pretty obvious. But we're going to be ranking our top 10 highlight tape athletes of all time from 10 all the way down to 1. And I think this is the best list you'll find anywhere. Number 10 is College Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow's highlights at LSU, some of the throws he made were absolutely unbelievable. And you have to also consider the context and circumstances of some of the highlights that we, was putting up on a consistent basis. Highlights like some of the throws he made at LSU against Alabama in Tuscaloosa. Some of the throws he made in the college football playoff semifinal game. A lot of them weren't like, oh my God, like this guy is the most dynamic, insane, flying around. Nobody would argue that Joe Burrow, runs the fastest or jumps the highest or does these different things. But some of the throws he made were absolutely obscene. They were ridiculous. On the run, he would scramble, he'd run, his decision-making, everything he did in college at LSU for that 1 year was absolutely ridiculous. Not to mention his statistics and numbers could back that up very easily. So number 10, highlight reel athlete of all time, is College Joe Burrow at LSU specifically. Yeah, let me clarify that. College Joe Burrow at LSU for that 1 year. Number 9 is Giancarlo Stanton. Okay. The guy is built like a refrigerator. He's the size of an industrial sized, or let's just say he's the size of a family sized regular refrigerator in anybody's home kitchen. He's gigantic. He hits balls so hard and at such odd and low launch angles and trajectories, and they still just go out like easily. He hit a grand slam last season, a walk-off grand slam to win a game for the Yankees. It was like, it looked like a line drive base hit to left field, but it just sizzled its way over everybody's head and into the 8th row of the bleachers. It was ridiculous to see somebody do that. I mean, he's hit balls out of Dodger Stadium. He's hit balls well over 500 feet. And he does it, 10, 15 times a year where you're just like, oh my gosh, this guy is so much stronger than everybody in the sport. So number 9, and the only baseball player I'll have on this list as a bit of a spoiler, is number 9 at Giancarlo Stanton as a highlight reel athlete. Number 8 is Johnny Manziel at Texas A&M. And that goes unspoken. Everybody remembers some of the plays that Johnny Manziel did. And if you're a quarterback on an opposing team and you're able to go in to Tuscaloosa and beat Alabama on the road, you're going to have some highlight reel plays at some point in that game. And my God, did he ever. Not only that, but he had some plays, man, where he would just scramble around, running around in the backfield with his chicken with its head cut off, turn around and just air a ball out, and it would complete it for 30 yards. Ridiculous. Yeah, it was a lot of luck. But the other part of the Johnny Manziel factor that made it so electric was not only his playmaking ability, and this is something that Joe Burrow didn't really offer as much, and that's to no fault of his own, right? To each guy handles their business differently. But when Manziel would make these ridiculous throws, he would flex, he would dance, he would, celebrate. And that to me adds that little extra spice and flair that had him jumping a guy like Burrow, because Burrow's numbers were better than Manziel's, and his performances and types of throws, honestly, and his decision making was better than Manziel's. But Manziel's highlights were a little bit more ridiculous, and then his celebrations afterwards, being Johnny Manziel and the guy that he was, it was a complete package that would consistently produce electric highlight reel tapes from Johnny Manziel. So number 8 is Johnny Manziel at Texas A&M. Number 7 on this list is Blake Griffin on the Clippers. There was a few highlights of Blake Griffin on other teams that were ridiculous too, but some of that like 6-month span or that 4-month span when he was with the Clippers, and I think he was paired up with DeAndre Jordan a handful of games too. Blake Griffin used to put his nuts in guys' nostril. Like, he used to be, his head the rim would be at his nose. It'd be nose height, and that's where the rim would be. And he would catch a ball, okay, in the paint, and he'd be like, of course the rim's 10 feet in the air, but he'd also be like 8 feet out, right? Where most guys would just turn around and throw like a little jump hook, like mid-range fade, one-handed hook shot or whatever you'd call it, just a nice touch over the top of the defender. Blake Griffin he would turn around and just go, all right, I'm going airborne, and just sail through the air. I mean, he would literally fly. He would fly in the air. Like, it looked like he had a jetpack on, catching these alley-oops, and just, like, it was ridiculous. I mean, there was a span, literally, it's like once a week, a Blake Griffin highlight. Oh, there he is, just murdering a human being. There it is again. It was ridiculous. So his highlight reels on the Clippers, and featuring a little bit, on other teams as well, were some of the most ridiculous I've ever seen. And that number 7 is Blake Griffin, without a question. Clippers, Blake Griffin, and a handful of highlights on other teams. Number 6 is Michael Jordan, the greatest basketball player of all time. Okay, Michael Jordan at 6 for me. This is mostly due to the fact of his killer instinct, his crazy hops, his innate ability to pull off anything from dunks to crossovers to three-point shooting to passing. He did it all at a really high level, obviously. Combine that with clutch ability, right? Making shots with the game on the line, winning at a really, really high clip, of course, with his, just hands full of championships with the Chicago Bulls, the 90s Bulls. He was an electric athlete. And he also, I don't want to say wasn't that big in the sense of like real life, because in real life, he's whatever he is, 6'4", 6'5". That's gigantic. But in the spectrum of the NBA, especially today's NBA, he was, kind of a small to middle-sized guy. And he was still putting ridiculous highlights together on a consistent basis and just routinely dominating the league and scoring at a ridiculous clip. So number 6 for me is Michael Jordan, as far as his highlight tapes go, because they're still electric, and you have to consider the fact that he's the greatest basketball player of all time. Number 5 is a bit of a niche one, but something that I think a lot of people know about. This is Tavon Austin's highlight tapes from West Virginia. Tavon Austin's highlight tapes from West Virginia, when I watched those tapes, I, along with a lot of other people, were convinced that Tavon Austin was going to be the greatest football player of all time. I mean, literally, some of the moves, some of the shakes, some of the broken tackles, some of the catches, some of the returns that Tavon Austin would pull off in these highlight reels at West Virginia. The other thing you have to consider, okay, in these highlight reels is not just, of course, the plays themselves and the athlete and what they're doing on the field, but the editing and the music choice and all these different things considered. And the Tavon Austin tapes from West Virginia were some of the most electric pieces of sporting content I've ever witnessed with my 2 eyes. That being said, as we all know, Tavon Austin never really panned out, right? He never really lived up to what was massive amounts of hype from his West Virginia tapes. I don't even think his metrics and numbers and stuff like at the combine were that electric. But everybody knew Tavon Austin from his West Virginia tapes. I mean, that's what he's known for. He's not known for his crazy NFL production. He's not even known for his stats specifically. Just his tapes and his highlight reels were insane. So number 5 highlight reel of all time for me, or highlight athletes, with Tavon Austin at West Virginia. Number 4 is Tiger Woods. Tiger Woods is the greatest golfer of all time. It's not really particularly close. And in order to understand and appreciate some of the shots that he pulled off on a consistent basis, you have to, know the game of golf to some degree, and you have to have played it at least a few times to understand that, like, taking a pitching wedge out of heavy rough from 200 plus yards and putting it on the green at a back pin location within 3 feet, it's not like really impressive. It's not like super hard. It is impossible. It's impossible. Some of the shots he would pull off are impossible. Combine that with the crowd reactions and the caliber of shots, the degree of difficulty on the biggest stages in the world. He had the innate ability to pull off just shots that were already impossible to begin with, but you add on the stage, you add on the pressure, right? The chip shot out of the rough at the Masters on the 16th that rolled down the green, 35, 40-foot roll after he chipped it out of the rough. Like a hole-in-one at the 16th hole at the Waste Management Open. How does this guy, it's just crazy. Not to mention some of the comebacks, some of the consistent, repeated dominance that he had. His shots were crazy. Absolutely crazy. So Tiger Woods for me is the number 4 highlight reel athlete of all time. Just some of his shots were just stupid. Just stupid. Okay? Number 3 on this list. Number 3 highlight reel athlete of all time with some of the most electric highlight tapes I've ever seen is Jason Williams. White chocolate. Okay? This guy would try stuff in NBA games, passes behind his back, like elbow passes, and between the leg pass. He would routinely make bounce passes to teammates through defenders' legs. Like, he would almost go out of his way to do it. He made the NBA look like a rec league game being played by an NBA player. Like, some of the passes he'd pull off were like, oh my God, how did he just do that? Or you'd have to like, wait, hold, what? That's the type of stuff, that's the type of reactions that for me puts him in the top 3 on this list, because he made it look not just easy, it was like confusing. It was like bamboozled everybody by pulling off some of the stuff that he would do on a consistent basis. Ridiculous. That elbow pass in itself, for me, puts him immediately in the top 5. He didn't have a long, illustrious MVP, Hall of Fame caliber career in a lot of people's eyes, and he's still top 3 on this list. And I don't think there's any discussion. Number 2 is Vince Carter. Vince Carter used to dunk on everybody. And he showed up to the NBA dunk contest and made that event sustainable. He's the reason the NBA runs the All-Star Game festivities and the dunk contest. Vince Carter is the reason why the dunk contest is as big a deal as it is today, and why it became a spectacle, because Vince Carter showed up and decided, you know what? I'm going to do things that probably no other human being in the history of athletic achievements would be able to replicate. That's how crazy some of his dunks were in the game and not in the game. He jumped over another human being in the Olympics. He jumped over him like a 7-foot tall player, a guy that's 7 feet. He just jumped over him and dunked the ball in the process. What? Nobody else is doing that. It's crazy. Absolutely insane and crazy what Vince Carter was able to pull off. Now, the number one highlight reel athlete of all time. Before we get to that, there's some notable honorable mentions that we want to include. Okay. Guys that just missed the cut. People are going to say, where's LeBron? Where's Bo Jackson? Where's Kobe? You know, where's Tom Brady or Peyton Manning or these different guys, Barry Sanders? You know, I get it. Okay. But to me, a lot of these guys didn't just, this is all subjective and personal opinion, right? These guys just didn't quite do it for me. Those guys all that I listed. Okay. But I can tell you who did. The number one highlight reel athlete of all time for me is Michael Vick. Michael Vick used to run around the field in regulation NFL football games and make it look like the guys trying to tackle him were Pop Warner Pee Wee football players. Like, he would just run up to a guy. He wouldn't juke him. He would just like turn and like run around people. Like, he would just run around them. Or he'd be in the backfield. He'd scramble out of pressure and he'd plant his feet and he would throw a football like 85 yards. And he would just flick it and it would go like 85 yards. The combination of Vick and Deshaun Jackson in the parts of his career where Vick, like I said, would just flip balls down the field. It's stuff where if you've ever tried to throw an NFL football that far, it's not only like not doable, it shouldn't be impossible. It shouldn't be physically possible. And he wouldn't just do it once or twice. He didn't just do it once or twice. He would do it like twice a game. He would just like flip a ball like 80 yards down the field. Or he would just scramble. He would just run just around people. The most electric athlete I think I may have ever seen. There's a handful of other guys that, as far as electric athleticism goes, they're probably right up there with Vick. We talk about highlight tapes, right? Because Vick played long enough in the league to accumulate enough enough electric highlights to put some tapes together. So my top highlight athlete of all time is Michael Vick. That's my list. From 10 to 1, it goes Joe Burrow at LSU at 10, Giancarlo Stanton at 9, Johnny Manziel at Texas A&M at 8, Blake Griffin at 7, Michael Jordan at 6, Tavon Austin, West Virginia at 5, Tiger Woods at 4, Jason Williams, White Chocolate at 3, Vince Carter at 2, Michael Vick at number 1.